Let me know once you're able to see my screen.
We can see.
Okay, fine. So let's first go with the array part. Okay, how do we add the element in array?
Index.
So let's take string array s array equal to new string array. This is one way to define your array part, and you have to always give your position, like what is the size you're trying to create, and only then your data gets added. And every time if I need to give some element, I need to provide the relevant position, and then I need to give the relevant data. So this is the way we usually create an array, right? What is the other way to create an array if you don't want to provide the or add the data explicitly and you want everything to be in first place? What is the other way to create an array?
Using the curly braces, give the all the.
Just give it this.
Give all the data.
So if I give like this. So this is the two ways to create an array. So how do you add the elements to an array? By giving the relevant position, you have to add. If you want to update any data set, so for instead of data, like earlier it was F, I wanted to update the data to data, like for the position 0. We need to again redefine the position and then tell us what data has to be overridden in the existing place. So this is the way we actually update. And if you want to add, that is again the same scenario. So for both creation and updation, the syntax would again remain same. How do you want to remove the data from here? How do you delete your data from your array?
So just make it null, right?
Okay.
Instead of
null. So 0 equal to null. Let me again. But I still see null, right? I want to remove the data itself. I don't want to make it null. Is it possible for me to remove the data?
I think it's no. I think we can remove the index instead of 0. I don't think we can.
So tell me again, SRE of 0?
Yeah, we cannot remove the question, right? We can just make it null or.
So is it possible for us to remove an element from an array, or it still holds that place?
It still holds the place.
Why?
In array, like we can replace with the other set of values, right? But we cannot.
That is what I'm saying. We can't delete it. Why? That is the reason I'm asking again. Why we can't delete or remove?
Fixed one array is of fixed size, so we cannot delete any question. We can just send it to null, or we can modify the data. But
So if you want to have a redefined, like restructured one after deleting it, you have to recopy it again to a different array part. Only then that particular position will be taken care of. But you can't delete it. But in case of list, there's a feature for you to remove that element. So you have explicitly a method as remove, which comes from your collection. So where you can remove that object so that in backend, the resizing happens and your entire array structure from 5 to 4, it will be automatically taken care of. But in case of array, that is not possible. Okay, so these are the operations you perform. And if you want to check the size, you go with length method in your array. Whereas in your list, you use the size method. Okay, so use SRR dot, you use the length, which is just an attribute, and you use that to get the length. Whereas in your array list, you use a method called size to get the entire size of your array list. Any other operations can we perform on array? Like we can do iteration, but apart from that, addition, creation, updation, deletion. So apart from that, you want to do anything else?
no, still.
Okay, so the same thing can be performed through array list.
The same can.
Yeah. So how do you create a list? Like this is a structure to create object. But are we like necessarily need to pass the size of this array list, or is it okay if we pass it as a default constructor too?
It's okay if you pass it as default.
Okay. So how does the array list gets created in the backend when we just give it as default? It has a default capacity, like it will be taken care, but internally it is been again an object array. Whatever you're doing is again an array in the backend. Okay. Now go back to this. So how do you add the elements to list?
Object dot add.
List dot add, and you add it. And if I want to add one more list in the list itself, or any kind of collection in the list, can I use add, or do we have any other collection? You see, there's something, the add is basically to add one element, and there's an overloaded method which tells you like based on the index also you can add. So because all your list in array works on the indexing tool. But there is also one more method with collection, right? This collection is a representation. This collection is the topmost class. Anything that extends string. So if you have a student class that extends string, or if you have any other child class that extends string, can be given in this particular one, because the list whichever you have defined is of type string. And if you want to add a collection, okay, similar to this string, or if you have one more duplicate, let's say this one, now I have say list copy. Now, if I wanted to add this into this particular one, is it still possible for me or not? Can I add the list copy here?
Yeah, you can add it.
Because it is actually extending a string. Say example, instead of string, do we have anything else here? I have it as vanilla. Okay. Now, what is happening here? Is it accepting it? It's not applicable for the type of vanilla cake, because it is acceptable only with a collection that extends only the parent of string and not anything else. So unless you have the topmost class, which is acceptable from all your attributes which you add into it, it's fine. And there's also like you can add one more collection into it, but only if it is again falling into the actual collection type which you have created. So this is the one thing to add your data set, and you can add based on index or without giving the index position. That is good. And if you want to remove anything from this list, you have something called remove, and you can remove if you know the data, or if you remove if you know the index position. Okay, these are the two things we have learned in Java 7. Don't see the below one, because they come from your Java 8. Okay, and what are the things you can do from your list? If you want to update a data, like in the list, in the first position, I have some element with hello. I want to update to a hello world. So how can I do it? How can I update the data? There's something called set. Okay. If you give the relevant index and if you give that element, that gets updated. Okay. So this is the way you can update your data set. But if you're not adding any elements and still you're trying to use set, will it work or not?
So we are going to.
For example, in the list, I'm not adding any, I'm not using add method itself. Okay. I'm not doing any addition and I'm not giving any operation to have some values in my list set. But instead, I'm going and giving list dot set of, and I'm giving 0 with LLL. Now, if I print this list and print list, and I want to get it, I'm giving get of 0. Will I get the data as LLL or will it be an empty list? Janaki?
Yes, Neha.
I'm asking you, like, I'm not adding any elements. I'm just giving set and I'm adding for the position 0 some data. Now, if I'm trying to retrieve, will I get data or will it be empty?
It will be null, right? Because it will be set in any of the location. It will not be.
I'm giving explicitly location also, right? Index 0.
Or then we'll get value.
But I'm getting an exception. Why?
It starts from one position, right?
Okay, let me give one. And give one again. I'm still getting the same error.
So maybe this list dot set function takes the size of the list, checks the size of the list and just checks it.
Yeah, but usually there's a growable list, right? Do I need to give the size again?
We have added
a size of 5. Okay, let me run it. I'm still getting same exception. I have defined the size. I'm giving for first position and trying to add some data to it.
So
why
can
is
you go
it
into
not
this?
making me to get the defined or giving an exception of index out of bound?
Can you just go into the definition of set function?
Which function?
List dot set function.
No, I can go there, but I'm just asking you. See, the same thing if I'm creating through string array, right? And if I'm giving SF0 and giving some data set, this is what I'm trying to do. Even set works similar way. But in this case, I'm getting the value printed, but in case of list, it's not happening. Why?
So for array, when you are creating, it will allocate the memory. I think it will initialize the default value.
So yeah, you're almost nearby. So if you are using an array, you are like making sure that this is the data, this is the position. Whereas an array list, as per the data you add, only then the list object gets created. It is just a reference. Okay, it just created a new object position. It don't have any data set. So only if you give list dot add, it actually creates the size of that list and makes my sizes right now 1. Okay. Now if I give this with 0, okay, and if I'm trying to get the relevant element, okay, should I get KK or should I get LLL? Hello?
This time it should be LLL.
LLL, because I'm updating the data which is already added and which is in the right now in the index position of 0. So you can use set only if the list holds some kind of data. Otherwise, it is just an empty data set. It is null. It don't have any memory. It is empty reference object. That's it. Whereas an array, SSARR, it is like an array which has a positions of 5. So you can index data, like you can add the data anytime, anywhere, because it has already fixed this position and it is already created memory for it. Whereas in list, unless you add, your memory doesn't get created. So that is the reason you're getting index out of bound, because my list is empty. I don't have anything. So you remember, you have to remember that you can use set only if your list holds something. Otherwise, you will be ending up with an exception, runtime exception, and you will not be able to handle any kind of manipulation things which you're doing on top of that particular collection.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the way we update the data. This is the way we add our data. And if you want to remove, you can actually use remove method, either with index or with data. And if you want to get any kind of data, you can use still the get method. So these are the operations we perform. And apart from that, if you want to use size check, or if you want to check is the list empty, or it is like that. So if you have any kind of scenarios where you're trying to set some kind of data like this, then you can ensure like if my list is not empty, do this kind of thing. So only if it is not empty, I'm trying to update it. Okay. So let me comment this out and see what the list.get.0 is giving me right now. You again see index 00. If I'm adding right now this, and then I'm trying to run again, I get LLL. So this is empty is basically to ensure that your list is empty, or it is like empty object, or it has some data set. So for that, we'll use this is empty. Okay, so these are the basic CRUD operations we can perform. Okay, and if you want to manipulate, like if you want to use this list and do any kind of operations, if you want to add some data or remove it for your collections of data set elements for that, then you use something called for each, which is very much known. Apart from for each, you have one thing called iterator. Okay, there are two things, iterable and iterator. What is the difference between iterable and iterator? Say if I have iterator here and if I have iterable from lang package, what is the difference? Let me go to iterator. So this is also an interface. This also holds methods like hasNext, next, remove, and this is from Java, so leave it for now. So you have hasNext, next, and remove methods, which helps you to finalize on performing the manipulation. Let me go back and go with the iterable interface this time. This is coming from java.lang package, and this holds iterator that has nothing but internally it is using your child class of iterator, and that is using this iterator method from your iterator interface, which is nothing but the hasNext, next, and everything. Okay, so is it okay if I'm using iterator directly? Yeah, perfectly okay. And if you wanted to use it from iterable, then it is also okay. Both are same, because internally you're actually achieving the same result from your iterator. So that is the reason in older codes, they might have used iterable, but later they have migrated to iterator, because internally we are actually coming and using the same thing of your iterator. So whatever type you're actually using, it is again type specific. You have to mention the type and iterator. And do I need to create an object here, or is it okay to use the collection directly? Janaki?
Create object, right?
I need to create an object? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Hello?
Yeah, do I need to create an object?
You need to create an object.
I need to create an object. Are you sure, Kulga?
We can use that list.
No. I just want to know whether I need to create an object or not.
No.
Create the
No.
object.
You who is saying no and who is saying yes?
I
Saying
said
yes.
no.
Okay. Let's go with Janaki. Why no, Janaki?
We can use that list like for which one we are going to iterate, the same thing we can use it in that iterator.
But okay, but why should not create an object for iterator?
We are not going to iterate the new thing, right? Like whatever we created already, in that only the list of items we are going to iterate each one.
Kirba, why do we need to create a reference or like object?
So iterator object has a copy of the list that we are going to iterate on. So I think we need to create an object.
Okay. Now both of you just see this and tell me, do I need to create an object?
Interface.
For interface, are we good to create an object?
Interface we just implemented.
Yeah. So interface, who implements it? From them, if we reference the mapping or the object reference should be fine, right? We don't need to create the object explicitly for our interface. So Janaki, whatever you said was okay, but the reason was not valid, because our list is a class which explicitly extends our collection, then iterable, where you have this iterator method. So from our child class, you can use that reference object and call the iterator directly. So that is the reason we use the reference of our collection and we use the iterator method. If you got an idea on why we create a reference only for child and not for the interface, you remember the interface concept here?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
So just for interface, we will call the class directly, right? Like instead of object.
Sorry?
For interface, we will call the method directly instead of via object, right? For interface.
No, even here I'm creating the object and calling it. I'm not using the iterator and calling it. I'm using the child class list, and this is the one which implements that interface. And from that interface, I'm using the iterator, and that reference is actually, see, why am I mapping? This is nothing but the type reference, right? What is type reference? Hello? So you remember what is the type reference?
Type reference like for the child class will point it to parent
What
class.
kind of polymorphism does this fall into?
Same, right?
Sorry?
Runtime.
Runtime. Yeah. Why do we say runtime?
We create an
Only
object
during
for
execution we will get the data type for this.
So basically, any parent can be assigned with any child. So you don't need to explicitly say this child is only responsible for me. Even if I give set.iterator, it works. If I give map.iterator, it works. So the child can be anything, any class that implements iterator, I'm okay to take it because I'm the parent for all them. So that is what the runtime polymorphism tells us. So the left is always your parent, the topmost of that particular child, and the right would always be assigned with the relevant child reference. If you're giving list.iterator, say example, if I have the object class, right, object obj, I can still create the child string. I can still create the student. Okay, I can do anything. Just a moment, I'll reconnect again. 1 minute. Sorry for the line. Yeah. So you remember the runtime polymorphism. So the parent cannot. So Kiriba and Janaki there.
Yeah, that's
Oh, yes, Neha.
Sorry. Yeah. So the parent can be anything on your left of your assignment, and the right can be the child of that. So only if they have a relationship, any kind of parent-child relationship, then you can have the reference. If you want to cross-check whether this kind of relationship exists or not, you have a keyword called instance of. So that tells that it's a Boolean one, which results your Boolean value, which tells like whether these two have a kind of relationship and the object which I created actually an object of student or not. So this is a type of type reference which we most probably use. And why do we go for type reference and instead of not creating an object directly to student or directly to the list is if you're using this iterator in future, there is a scenario that right now you have created a list and you're doing all the operations, but you have got a requirement on enhancement that I don't want duplicate data. I want all my data to be unique. So what do? You go and create a set and then you add all your data. But when you wanted to create an object to iterate your data, if you're not using this type reference, what would have you done there? Instead of doing this, what would have you done if it was a new thing? Like if you want to just iterate from list iterator, do I need to give list string? Equal to list dot iterator. So what is happening? I'm actually need to give the iterator of string and I'm passing a list reference one and I'm creating an object for it. So explicitly I'm creating a reference for that list and then I'm doing the operation. In future, I don't want list and set. I want to expand to map. Again, I need to recreate an object and everything has to be changed. So which has a tight relationship with your class, which is your child class. To avoid that kind of tightly coupled relationship, we are actually making it loosely coupled by just mapping it with the relevant parent and child. So all the parents, so even if you change this list to set, I'm okay to accept. If you change this to map, I'm okay to accept because this is just a reference I'm trying to use. So the code change would be very minimal if you do loosely coupled. If you're doing tightly coupled, wherever you have your iterator used and wherever you have your list used, you have to rechange that to the entire line has to be rechanged to set or entire line has to be rechanged to map. But if you use this type reference, I'm okay to accept anything or the code change would be very minimal. I just need to replace this entire object, the child object, and I can perform all the things which is actually expected. So I can just go there and check it whether I have the next element. If I have the element, I just go and fetch it. That's it. This is what I do. So the type reference is always preferable. Going forward in all your frameworks, you would be able to notice this type reference, runtime polymorphism majorly rather than the static polymorphism. So any like any queries on this iterator and for which we need to create an object and for not, any questions?
clear.
You're clear, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So basically for when you're doing with collections, your interface, abstraction logic, the runtime polymorphism. So basically the runtime polymorphism is the major concept behind your collections. So wherever you go, you'll be majorly seeing only this type reference part. And on top of that, you'll be observing all your collections, like basically the wrapper classes instead of your primitive classes. So now let's go to the time complexity for that. So what would be the time complexity for my get things of an array? And how does that vary for my array list? We'll see these things right now. So to retrieve a data from an array, there is again an indexing, right? So what would be the time complexity here for O of 1 or O of n? What would be the time complexity for array?
O of n.
O of n, okay.
Order of 1
order
to
of
get.
because you're giving the index, right? Index is fixed one. So in that case, there is no much complexity. You're just going to that index and get it. So the time complexity would be very minimal if you give the position. If you're not giving position and telling me to get entire data set, then my complexity would be O of n. Or if you're trying to fetch only one thing, then my time complexity would be different. So in case of array list and array, the time complexity is O of 1. Okay. Now, let's go to addition. Like, how do you add the elements into it? Is it again O of n or O of 1?
Removing.
No, not removing, adding, insertion.
Question
So,
for linked list, right?
yeah, a list. I'm just asking about array and array list. So basically the array and array list will be similar. So complexity would be similar. So I'm just trying at one place. So tell me what happens if I need to add the data into your array list.
If we add a data, it will be added the last.
Okay.
So we need to traverse through all the nodes and then find the last one and then we can add it, right?
No. See, now example, if I'm adding, right now I'm in the position 5. If I add an element, it will obviously add in the from last, so this is the
Okay.
6th position, right? So there is no change for me to go before and back and forth. Nothing is going to happen there. So it will always be like static. It goes to the last position, add it. That is all. So that is always be O of 1 in terms of adding the data. Okay. But in terms of removal, okay. Now, in the same array, if I'm removing 10th position, it has to find out the index, go there, remove it. If I'm giving 5th position, it has to go there, remove it, and then realign everything from 6th to 10th position to the 5th from the 5th position. So everything is happening. So where it's basically like push and pop. Wherever your position is 5, I need to push all the data from 5 to 10 out, remove the 5th position, and then again push all the data into it from 5th position instead of 6th. So where you have more work, more task, because you're dependent on the rest of the elements you have in your list or in the size of your array. So this is the place where your complexity gets expanded to O of n on your removal. So that is the one which actually takes an average time rather than a best time.
Does it take number of n? Because so we need to go to that location, that's agreed. So do we need to push and pop? We just
No, I'm just making you to understand what happens internally from 6th to 10th. So what happens when your 5th position is not there in your array list? What happens? You have to, because when you add any data to your list, right? The list dot add, the index is actually taken care based on the way you actually input it. So whatever order you insert, the order is like insertion order. So whatever you add, that would be remaining the same way. So if I just give list dot add of LLLL, so my position of this one would be still in the second place only. It will not change, right? Because the list maintains the order. Insertion order is maintained in your list, array list. So when I wanted to remove, so right now there is no indexing for this, but in the back end, what happens? 0 will be with KKK, 1 will be this. So let me take one more position so that I can discuss about the middle element removal. So now I have 3 positions. Now in this, I want to remove this one. So what do? What happens in the back end? If I give this position as 1, so how many elements I have in my list right now? I have 3 elements. So in the 3 elements, my position which I'm trying to remove is the middle element. So I need to go first search on the index of middle element, find that, delete it. So that position is removed. But internally, what this list does, it compresses and expands your size. So what should I have totally at my list.add or list.size? It has to be only 2. So what should I do? I have to bring the third element to the second position and remove the second position completely out of my list. So what is happening? The compression is done. So this is completely taken out from that particular index, but still this is in third position. I want to move this third position back to second and make sure that my size is only 2 and no more 3 again. So where the resizing is happening in the backend, we are not responsible for that. We are just using the list collection, that's it. But internally, the resizing is happening where the element which you are dependent on is the next element after your index. So index plus 1, all the elements have to be pushed back to the index position which you have deleted right now. That is your current position. So to the current position, you are bringing back the next position and adding it. So the address is getting changed from your data element of KK with not with LLLL position. Instead, it's going with LLLNN position. So my address has to be mapped from KK to here. So this has to be internally taken care, where you're dependent on number of elements which you're trying to have in your list and which element are you trying to delete it. If suppose you're removing the last element, even then the O of n has to happen because luckily you don't have next element after this particular position. So you're okay. But what if you have position, then everything has to be moved to the before position. So the addressing has to be taken care. That is the reason we are dependent on the number of elements in your list. Whereas in your insertion, it will always go into the next place and not in before or somewhere else. It will always be the next. So we don't need to worry about insertion here. But for deletion, we need to worry because we're going to resize the list again. That is the one why we say the iteration complexity would be of O of n. Because based on the number of elements, your removal is happening. Basically, the removal is very easy because it's only on index. But moving those elements again back to the entire list and making it again realigned is taking more time. So that is the reason your complexity is actually ending up with O of n. Other than that, the removing part is actually easy. But resizing is also adding on the burden of the removal part. So that is the reason the time complexity is O of n here. Are you clear, Kirba?
Yeah, okay.
Any questions?
The same way for set or update, the time complexity should be order of n, right?
Yeah. No, set update would not be the O of n. It will be again O of 1. Similar to your add, because you know the index. Whenever you update, you give the position also, right? You're just changing only that element and not any other element. And that too, you're not changing the index, you're changing only the data. So your position still will be the constant only, O of n.
But still we need to traverse, right? For example, we have a list of 10 elements.
Okay.
And we are going to set or update the last element. So
yeah, if you're trying to set an update or data, you're just passing the index set. You can't go and use set position alone. Will I be able to just use set? It will obviously ask me the index, right? Without index, you can't go and do. So obviously, it's whenever you have index, it's O of 1. You know that position. You're going to fetch only that.
For remove also we're using index, right? For remove.
Yeah, removal also you can use index. But what I'm saying is on removal, there's one more additional task is it has to realign the entire list object because it is moving out of your list. Whereas in your set, you're just changing the data. You're not removing the element.
In case of removal, we just, for example, we are removing the 5th element. So what we will do is we will take the 4th element and
so if I'm trying to use
element.
list dot remove and if I'm giving the position of 2, okay, so which is my last element actually. So what only in your last element you don't have a burden of realigning it, but in general if you're giving anything in between, say if I'm giving one position, what should I do? I need to remove this one. This is completely gone. But right now, KK is still looking for the address of this one. But I need to tell that you're no more looking for this. Your next position would be this. So I need to realign and tell to my existing element in my list element KK, your next position so far by going next would be this LLLNN elements position and not LLL position. So I need to tell the previous element because I'm responsible on the removal part. So I need to tell the entire elements in my list and make sure by all the addresses are accurate. If I'm not responsible, what happens? The KK will still look for the position of 2, where the position of 2 is right now null. So what happens every time you iterate, you get null or you get an empty data set there. So the removal is also O of 1, but it has an additional burden to make sure the list is again appropriate with the relevant mapping. So that is the reason we are ending up with O of 1 here. That is the complexity we take time because if it's a